You've had a long career in prostate cancer and advocacy. Can you tell us how you started?
Absolutely. Specific to prostate cancer, I have familial prostate cancer. My father had prostate cancer. His brother had and died from prostate cancer. His only son, his only child, had prostate cancer. So I kind of assumed that I was going to, have to deal with it. Although I do have an older brother who has almost no PSA. I'm glad for him. So I do have familial prostate cancer. I had prostatectomy when I was 50 years old, and at age 55, I had a prostate cancer reoccurrence. So I am metastatic, and I have been metastatic now since 55. I'm now 70, almost 71. That's an important take home for people. Being metastatic, having advanced prostate cancer is not a death sentence. A lot of people think, oh my God, I'm going to die quickly or soon. I'm what, how many years? 55, 65, 7. I'm 16 years. And I actually am as healthy today as I was when I was initially diagnosed with a reoccurrence. And I think that's helped me a lot. And I think the important take home is we have great treatments today. We have great ways to deal with it. It's certainly better than when I first had my reoccurrence. And there are a lot of options. And we are in a good time, and it's only getting better.
The patients would definitely want to know what treatments and any side effects you have. So, can you run us through that reoccurrence that you had and what treatments you did, and 16 years later, what your PSA is at?
Sure. I'm an outlier, and I think that's also another take home. I mean, when you start a treatment, you never know how you're going to respond, and there are some people who have a response, and some people who have an okay response, and there are other people who basically respond off the chart. I'm a respond off the chart guy because all these 16 years, I'm still today am castrate sensitive. In other words, I still respond to hormone therapy. So I have not moved on to most of the other advanced treatments, but I know that they're there for me, when and if I'm going to need them. I do believe at some point I will. As I said, I have been doing what's called intermittent hormone therapy, where I go on and off therapy.
Wait. You've been doing intermittent hormone therapy for 16 years with Lupron?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
As I said, I'm an outlier. I've Lupron, and when the Lupron became difficult to get a hold of, I used Eligard, which is a Lupron-like drug. So it's the same thing. Now, this last round, when I went back on, and I've been back on now for probably 5 months, I'm taking a different drug. I'm not using Lupron because what was happening is my PSA doubling time was starting to compress. A PSA doubling time is how long does it take for your PSA to double in numbers, like a 2 to a 4 is one double, 4 to 8 is one double, 8 to 16 is another double. And I measure, and we all should be measuring that time. How long does it take for your PSA to double? It's another way to look at the progression of your disease. And what was happening is I had been doubling about every year, and it's compressed over the time. And I began to double about every 4 to 5 weeks. And so I
Hmm.
felt as though I'm moving towards castrate resistance, and the disease is beginning to progress despite my treatment. So what I did is I started a new drug. It's an oral equivalent of Firmagon called Orgovic, also known as Regulix, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing those correct. And it basically caused me to become chemically castrate quite quickly, as it's designed to do. So I had no PSA flare. A PSA flare is when you first take Lupron or those related drugs. As they start working, you get your PSA starts. The cancer seems to respond in almost in the wrong direction, and you have a higher PSA. And if somebody who is sick, that can actually be very detrimental. So we want to avoid a flare. And there are ways, if you're on Lupron, to avoid it by taking another drug called Casodex. And these are things you should be discussing with your doctor. The beauty of this new drug, Orgovix, is that it doesn't have that PSA flare. And I have been on that now. I think it's about 4 or 5 months. About the second month in, I developed a pretty severe rash, which is a very unusual side effect, although it is listed if you go through the lists, from the clinical trials. And my assumption initially was that I would not be able to use it anymore because I had this allergic type of response. But I was doing a little more research, and here's what I think is important. We as patients need to know our disease. We need to understand our cancer, and we need to do our research and to find resources that'll help us do that. And I stumbled upon an article and a video by a couple of urologists who had put their patients on the Orgovics, and they had a rash, and they stopped the drug. They waited until the rash calmed down, and then they put them back on, and they did not develop the rash again. And so I took that publication, I brought it to my oncologist, and I said, "Have you seen this?" And he hadn't. It was not in a very well published, a very high impact journal. And I said, "I want to try that." And he looked at it, and he reached out to a couple of his colleagues and said, "Your choice." And you're right, it is my choice because I'm the patient. I go home with whatever the result is, negative or positive, as we all do. We leave our doctor. We're the ones that go home. The doctor goes on to another patient. And that's not meant to be a negative doctor. It's to reflect what's reality that we as patients have to deal with. So I went back on it, and I'm now back on it for a number of months, and I have no sign of a recurrent rash. So it's really important for us to do our research and try to understand, and then to communicate with our doctors and to share. Now, if he had told me that I'm really not comfortable with it, I would have had a conversation with him. I can't tell you whether I would have done it or not anyway. I don't know. You don't know because you don't go there. But we would not have engaged in the conversation. I would not have gone back on the drug if I hadn't, brought this to his attention, because he was ready to put me back on Lupron, or perhaps consider one of the others, second line hormone therapies. I think probably would have gone that direction, but I don't know because we never got that point in the conversation.
Well, you've already covered so many important topics here. First of all, researching yourself, working with your medical team. The other point that I really love that you made right now is just the concept of when you're working with your medical team, you're not being combative. You realize he's on your side. You've picked a good team member to begin with. And so, from that concept, you're really having a conversation.
I think that's really important. I think how you put your medical team together. Now, you mentioned I also have 4 other cancers, okay? And so this all interplays with each other. And I've been treated for all those cancers, and I do surveillance for all those cancers now. And each of those cancers are being treated by a different oncologist, or I have a main oncologist for different ones. And those are selected by me and by my main caregiver, my wife, Wendy, who is very helpful and supportive of this process. But and again, I don't mean to denigrate doctors, but doctors are very well educated contractors, and I apologize if anyone takes offense with that. And I am going to, if I were redoing my home, I'm going to bring a contractor in, and I want to get their advice. I want to hear, what do they think? Can we do this? Can we do that? But honestly, when it comes to deciding what color I want to paint that wall, or do I want to use this cabinet there or that cabinet there, okay, I'll ask them, the contractor, was there a reason that I shouldn't use this cabinet there based on your experience? And I'm going to factor all of that in. And I do that when I work with my doctors. It's like, I want to know what they know. I want them to share. I want their feedback. And I have a huge amount of respect for it because they have a lot more experience than I do. But ultimately, I'm going to make the decision because it's my body.
Well, you mentioned the 4 other cancers. What are the other 4 cancers that you have had?
At age 30, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Thank you. I'll think of it. With thyroid cancer, and I had a partial thyroidectomy, partial removal of the thyroid gland. And from there, I went to prostate cancer at age 50. When I had the prostate cancer reoccurrence, when I did a scan, how did I know I had a reoccurrence? My PSA went from basically undetectable to 87 in a very short course of time. And I did a scan, and we saw I had a couple lymph nodes that looked involved, and then I had a huge tumor in my kidney. But the kidney, with some testing, we found out that the kidney had stopped functioning. So we had to remove the kidney. We assumed that was going to be prostate cancer. And when we got the pathology report back, it was not prostate cancer. It was renal or kidney cancer. And I today thank God that I had a prostate cancer reoccurrence, because it meant I went out to get this scan that identified this problem. Because if I didn't have my kidney removed, there was a good chance I wouldn't be here today, because that was getting ready to burst and that it would have spread throughout that whole area. So I had my second cancer, third cancer, then was renal cancer that happened along with what was, in fact, a prostate cancer reoccurrence. Um, that's three. And then from there, I moved into melanoma. And my last cancer was appendiceal cancer, which is a rare cancer. There's about 500 diagnosed in the United States. I had very severe pain. Went to a walk-in clinic. The doctor said I was having appendicitis, but that it was inflamed and needed to be taken care of. So I was went over to the hospital, and had an appendectomy the next day, and looked like simple, straightforward. And then, of course, we got the pathology back, and the doctor had the pathology report for almost a week and a half before they reached out to me to come in and talk about it. Now, I already knew I had appendiceal cancer because I pulled my own records, and you can do that. You can access your own medical records, and I already read the pathology report. And so when I went in to be told that I have cancer, I already knew that for a week, and I already had started my research. And that's important. So when the doc came in, it was uncomfortable because he didn't know that I knew that I had cancer. And he sat down very nervous. He says, well, Mr. Nowak, I want to explain something to you. And I said, look, doctor, let's just cut it short. I have appendiceal cancer. And he looked at me like this. Yeah, you do. And I said, okay, I know it. So let's actually cut to the chase. In your opinion, where are my next steps? I want to know what it's, and he wasn't very helpful, but that's, he's a general surgeon. Bottom line is we need to understand, as I said earlier, we need to understand and know our disease. We need to know our cancer. And in one way we can access that is by accessing our medical records. And I always recommend that people create and keep a medical notebook, which has copies of every test you've ever had, blood test, scan, get the disc for the scan, surgical notes if you've had surgery, notes from the radiologist if you've had radiation treatment, and you have it in one place. Now, just having it is not adequate. You also need to read it and make sure you understand it. And if you don't understand it, you go back to the doctor and you ask, what does this mean? And if they can't explain it so that you understand, you take it to other places. You could take it to other patients, take it to advocacy groups. You could take it to another doctor. Okay. And I think a second opinion is not, in line. Could you explain this to me? I don't understand what it means. What's the significance of it? You need to understand that, because you need to be able to engage in an intelligent conversation. And you can't do that if you don't understand your disease.